Hello and welcome back. I would like to provide a demonstration, a solution to our previous challenge, which had to do with understanding character arrays. Mainly we're going to write functions to get the length of a string, a function to concatenate a string, and a function to check if two strings are equal. So I'm going to create a project. I'm just going to name it understanding character strings. And the first thing we'll do is we'll implement this length function. We're going to create three function declarations at the top. We're going to name the first one string length. We're going to use camel case for our naming. This is just going to take a constant character string. All right, so how do we know it's a string? Because it's a character array. And then we're going to put a semicolon. That'll be the first one we create, so we'll just stop there for now. And we're going to create this function, define it down below. So you should understand that nice keyword const. Right? Const means that it's a character string that cannot change, can't be modified. The reason we're using const here is because we don't want to modify the string inside the function. We just want to basically parse it and then return the length, return an integer. This function is actually pretty easy to implement because we're just going through an array. So we can actually say int count equals 0. This is a local variable. It can only be used inside this function. Now you may ask yourself, why can't we use the size of operator? Because the size of operator is just going to tell us the size of the string. It's not going to tell us how many characters are inside that string. But all we need to do is create a loop and go through the array until we hit the null terminator. So we can look at our string, we can say while the string count is not equal to the null terminator. The null terminator is represented inside a single character as a \0. All right, and we can use the not equals operator because we're comparing against characters. And we only have one thing in the body of this while statement, plus count, just incrementing count. And then when we want to return it, we just say return count. And that's it. That's the entire string length function. It's pretty easy because the character string is inside of an array. And the string ends with a null terminator. So to test this, we can go inside our main method and we can create some constant chars. We'll just say word1 JSON. Right, so this is how you create a character array in C. You don't have to have the constant there, but this isn't being modified. Use the char keyword, char data type, the identifier, and then the brackets. It's better to not specify the size inside the brackets because the C compiler will automatically add a null terminator. And then you just, after the assignment operator, you put in your string literal inside the double quotes. We'll create a couple here to just make sure it's working. And word 3 will just be whatever. And we can display character strings very easily because we can just use the %s symbol, right? Except what we really want to display here are the lengths. So we're going to use %d. So we're going to just print out the lengths of these three strings, %d, and we'll just have some spaces in between, and then add a line feed. And this is just going to call the string length function for each word. Pretty simple here. And that is it. So now we can build and test and see if this actually works. What we should see as output is we should see the length of JSON, which is 5, the length of OK, which is 2, and the length of whatever, which looks to be about 8. We build this, we want to make sure we have correct spelling because it won't build if you misspell. And again, I do not know how to spell. Typing too quick for my own good. All right, let's run this. So here we have 5, 2, and 8, which looks right. So that's how you can write a string length. Let's move on to the concatenation function. The concatenation function is just going to take 3 strings, 2 constants. And this is not going to return anything. It's just going to add to the, put the resulting string in the first parameter. So we're going to call it concat. We're going to have a result. And we're going to have 2 strings, one that we want to concatenate to, and then one that we want to just have a single string. So we'll name them string 1 and string 2. And there we go. And that's our function declaration, so we can use it anywhere before it's defined. Make sure I put a semicolon after it. Yep. This one is going to have to go through the array as well. It's just going to have to go through 2 arrays. And as we go through each, add to the resulting string. We're going to create a couple local variables which we can only use inside this function, int I and j. And then we're going to use a for loop to go through the array. We're going to say for I equals 0, str sub 1, or sub I should say, is not equal to the null terminator. And then also increment I. All right, we're familiar with our nice for loop syntax where we have the loop identifier as the first thing before the first semicolon, the condition where we jump out before the second semicolon, and then modifying the loop control variable to make sure we don't have an infinite loop. All we do here is we say result sub I equals stir1 sub I. Remember, these are characters, so it's perfectly fine to use the equals in assignment here. We can't do this in character arrays because character arrays you can't assign an array to an array. We would have to use a stir copy. So that's copying the first string, and now we want to concatenate the second string to result. So we would do something very, very similar, except we're going to look in the second array and we're going to make sure we put it in the right spot in result. So we would do something like this. We would go from j to 0, stir2 j is not equal to the null terminator, plus plus j. And you'll see result is just saying I plus j. So whatever I ended with, if I added 10 characters, it will now start at that 10th character because it's 0 based, and it will just add j to it. So 10 plus 0, 10 plus 1, and so forth. And that's it. And then, well, that's one last thing you got to do that's really important is you have to add that null terminator. So we want to say result I plus j, and then add in a single character, the null terminator, which is \0 inside a single quote. And that is our function. We don't have to return anything from this function because we're just copying in stir1 to stir, and I got to make sure I type correctly, stir1 to stir2. So let's test this. What I would expect to be able to do on this one is test it with a couple characters. So here let's create a couple. We'll use the existing characters that we have, and we're just going to concatenate a couple. So we need to create another result one. So we'll just say result, just declare it. And in here we're going to say, well, we'll have to specify a size though for that first one. And so we're going to just specify a size of 50. We're going to limit it. So these constant characters should work. Now we're just going to say printf. We're going to print out a string. So we're going to say %s, and then we're going to say concat, which is what we named it. We're going to pass in the result, and then word 1 and word 2. So what this should display as output, and we'll make sure we put it on a couple new lines. This should display as output JSON OK. And want to to make sure that we... So concat doesn't actually return any data, so I can't put it directly in the printf. What I have to do is call it and then display result. Simple mistake. So there we call concat, everything gets put in the result, and we display the result. So again, when we run this, we should see JSON OK, and we do. Third function that we want to implement is a comparison function to check if two strings are equal. This function should return a Boolean. So we want to include our standard bool. I think that's the name of it, hopefully. So we can use Boolean and true and false values. And this will actually be defined as equal strings. This is going to take a constant character array, S1, and a constant, another one, to check if two strings are equal. And just to make sure I included the right header, I'm going to try to build that. And I think I did. So now I'm able to use the bool keyword because I included this. And I can also use true or false. So let's implement this equal strings. This is going to be much of the same, really, just going through the array and checking each character. So we're going to create a couple local variables, I equals 0 for our loop, initialize at 0, and a Boolean that just tells us if they're equal, because this is what we're going to return. Something like is equals. And we could actually initialize this to false. And our while loop is just going to go ahead and compare. What we want to do first, actually, is we want to get the count. We want to see how big both of these are. So we can have a while loop because we need the count in order to look at the size. Basically to just check for that null termination. So we're going to assume that the strings we pass in are the same size. So we can write a simple while loop. You could write if statements as well. I kind of incorporated everything into a while loop, or my comparisons, by using the logical operators. You don't have to use logical operators. You could use an if statement and just go through the entirety of a second string. But here what I did is I said while s1 sub I is equal to s2 sub I, and they're not equal to null terminators. Because if they're equal to null terminators, we want to jump out if either one's a null terminator. So now we say plus plus I, and then the last thing we have to do is just check if those are null terminators. And if they are, you can set your Boolean variable to return the right data. So here we can say if s1 sub I is equal to a null terminator and s2 sub I is equal to a null terminator, set our Boolean variable is equals, and then we want to return that. And then just say return is equals. And to test this, we'll have to test a good string and a bad string. So let's go ahead and say equal strings. I'm going to print out just the integer value of the Boolean, so %d. And we're going to say equals strings. Here this returns something, so we can put this in the print expression. Equals string, I just want to make sure I equal strings. Thought I had that wrong. Equal strings, and then we'll pass in JSON, comma, JSON. And we'll call it again. Make sure we add a line feed. And this time we'll say JSONs. And the first one should return 1, second to return 0. 1 represents true, 0 represents false. When we run this, we see 1 and 0. 1 for true and 0 for false, except it's tough to read because we don't have a line feed, so let's add a line feed. And just to show you again, now we see 1, 0. True, false. Jason, Jason is equal to each other. Jason's Jason is not equal. So these are some quick functions that you can learn from. Learn basically about the character arrays and how strings are represented with this concept. Thank you. I'm also going to provide the source file so you can look at it in more detail. Hopefully this helped with your assignment.